I always knew my parents viewed love as a transaction, but I never expected them to present an invoice 3 days before my wedding. They slid a contract across the mahogany table. Total obedience regarding the guest list and speeches. Or they would cancel every vendor check they had written. They gambled on my fear of humiliation, assuming I could not afford to pay for my own dignity. They forgot that I had spent 33 years saving up for exactly this moment. The spreadsheet on my dual monitors at North Harbor Consulting Group was balanced to the penny. Unlike the rest of my life, I stared at the cells, watching the cursor blink. It was 10 in the morning on a Tuesday, 3 days before my wedding, and I was hiding in my office. My colleagues knew me as Vivian the Reliable, the woman who could de-escalate a hostile merger negotiation with a calm voice and a 3-ring binder. I was the person you called when you needed someone to absorb the panic in the room and transmute it into a checklist, but looking at the projection for the fiscal quarter. All I could feel was the vibration of my phone on the desk, buzzing with a persistence that made my stomach turn. It was my mother. Elaine Morgan did not text. She called, and if you did not answer, she called again, assuming that the only reason for your silence was a catastrophe that required her immediate intervention. I pressed the silence button and flipped the phone face down. Briar Glen, Massachusetts, was beautiful in the autumn. The maples outside my office window were burning red and gold. A picturesque New England backdrop that usually centered me. Today, however, the landscape felt brittle, as if a strong wind could snap the whole town in half. My door creaked open. It was Sarah, my supervisor. She leaned against the frame, holding a coffee mug with both hands. "Vivian," she said, her voice soft. "You are still here. I thought you were taking the week off for the wedding prep. I am wrapping up the Henderson file," I said, forcing a smile that I hoped looked professional rather than terrified. I wanted to make sure everything was clean before I handed it over. Sarah looked at me for a long moment. She was a perceptive woman, the kind who noticed when your eyeliner was slightly uneven or when you were typing loudly to drown out your own thoughts. "You are known for being cautious." "Vivian," Sarah said, "but do not let that caution turn into avoidance. Go home. Get married. The Henderson file will survive without you for 5 days." I nodded, feeling the familiar burn of shame. I was 33 years old, a senior consultant, and yet I was using corporate paperwork to avoid my own parents. I packed my bag, shut down my computer, and walked out into the crisp October air. The drive to my apartment should have been 10 minutes of peace. Instead, it was a 10-minute rehearsal of what I would say, how I would stand, and how I would breathe when I walked through my front door. My parents, Elaine and Howard Morgan, had arrived in town 24 hours early. They called it helping. I called it an inspection. When I unlocked the door to the pre-war apartment I shared with Ben, the smell hit me first. It was not the scent of the coffee Ben brewed or the vanilla candle I usually burned. It was expensive perfume and judgment. Elaine was standing in the center of the living room, holding one of my throw pillows by the corner as if it were a dead rodent. Howard was seated at our small dining table, his iPad propped up, looking at the room with the detached skepticism of a building inspector condemning a structure. "Vivian," Elaine said, dropping the pillow back onto the sofa. "Finally, we have been here for 45 minutes. The doorman let us in. You really should speak to him about security protocols." Anyone could just walk in. "Hello? Mother? Hello? Dad?" I said, placing my keys in the bowl. I kissed Elaine's cheek, which was cold and powdery, and nodded to Howard. "We are just trying to help," Howard said without looking up from his screen. "This timeline for the rehearsal dinner is a mess. Vivian, I am looking at the traffic patterns for Friday evening. If we leave the hotel at 5, we are going to be sitting on the bridge for 20 minutes. I have taken the liberty of moving the start time to 4:30. I felt the muscle in my jaw tighten. "Dad, invitations have already gone out. People are working. They cannot get there at 4:30. "Then they should have planned better," Howard said, scrolling. "The Morgan standard is punctuality. Vivian, we do not sit in traffic." I walked into the kitchen to get a glass of water. my hands shaking slightly. This was the dynamic. It had always been the dynamic. They arrived, they assessed, and they corrected. To the outside world, the Morgans were pillars of the community, generous philanthropists, and devoted parents. Howard Morgan was a developer who reshaped skylines. Elaine Morgan was the woman who organized the charity galas that funded half the hospitals in the state. They were impressive people, but impressive people often cast very long, very cold shadows. Ben walked in from the bedroom then, wearing his favorite worn-out flannel shirt. Ben Calder was everything my parents were not: warm, steady, and unconcerned with how things looked to an audience. He was a landscape architect who worked with soil and stone, things that were real and tangible. "Hey, Viv," Ben said, crossing the kitchen to wrap his arms around me from behind. He kissed the top of my head. I could feel him assessing my tension, measuring the stiffness in my shoulders. "How are we doing?" he whispered against my hair. "We are moving the rehearsal dinner." "Apparently," I whispered back. Ben squeezed me once, tight, then let go and turned to face the living room. "Howard, Elaine, good to see you." Howard finally looked up. "Benjamin, I trust you have checked the weather reports. They are calling for wind on Saturday. The tent flaps will need to be secured properly. I do not want guests chasing napkins across the lawn. Larkspur House knows what they are doing." "Howard," Ben said, his voice easy but firm. "They host weddings every weekend, not Morgan weddings." Elaine interjected. She was moving things now. She shifted a stack of magazines on the coffee table, aligning them perfectly with the edge. She moved a coaster 3 inches to the left. It was a nervous tick she had honed into a weapon. Disorder made her itch. "We have a meeting with the venue coordinator in an hour." Elaine said, "I have a list of concerns. The floral arrangements in the mock-up were inadequate. They looked sparse. I told the florist to double the volume of the hydrangeas." "Mom," I said, stepping out of the kitchen. "We talked about this. I wanted the greenery to be simple, wildflowers and ferns, not massive structured centerpieces. Simple reads as cheap." "Vivian," Elaine said, her eyes scanning the room, looking for the next thing to fix. "And we are not cheap people. Your father and I have contributed a significant amount to this day. The least you can do is ensure it does not look like a backyard barbecue." There it was, the tag, the price. I had spent my 20s refusing their money because I knew how heavy it was. I had paid for my own college tuition by working 3 jobs. I had bought my own car. But for the wedding, I had faltered. When Ben proposed, my parents had swept in with tears in their eyes, claiming they wanted to give us this gift. They wanted to bury the hatchet of my independence and be a family. I had wanted to believe them. I had wanted, just for once, to be the daughter who was taken care of, rather than the daughter who managed everything. So I accepted their contribution. I let them pay for the venue and the catering, and now I was realizing that I had not accepted a gift. I had signed a contract without reading the fine print. "We should go," I said, checking my watch. "We do not want to be late." The drive to Larkspur House was silent. I sat in the back of my parents' luxury sedan, watching the back of my father's head. Ben had insisted on driving his truck separately, saying he had to pick up a few things, but I knew he just needed 20 minutes of oxygen before diving back into the tank. Larkspur House was a stunning estate on the edge of Briar Glen, a sprawling manor with manicured gardens and a view of the river. It was the kind of place that whispered old money. We met the coordinator, a harried woman named Jessica, in the main office. Jessica looked tired. When she saw my mother, she looked exhausted. "Mrs. Morgan," Jessica said, forcing a bright smile. "Mr. Morgan, Vivian, so good to see you all. We have the final run of show here." Elaine did not sit down. She walked to the large whiteboard where the seating chart was magnetized. She stared at it for a long time. The silence stretched, thin and tight. "This will not do," Elaine said. I stepped forward. "What is wrong? We finalized the seating last week." Elaine plucked a magnetic tag off the board. "Table 4. You have put the Kellehers next to the rest of the cousins." "Yes," I said. They are cousins. The Kellehers are loud, Elaine said, dropping the magnet into her palm. And frankly, having them that close to the head table is a distraction. Put them in the back, near the kitchen doors. Mom, Aunt Sarah loves the Kellehers. I said, I am not hiding family members in the corner. Elaine turned to me. Her face was perfectly composed, her makeup flawless. It was a mask she had worn for 40 years. Vivian, this is not just about you. This is a social event. People will be watching. The Kellehers dress poorly and they drink too much. I will not have them ruining the aesthetic of the dinner. She moved the magnet to table 19, the farthest table from the front. Then she reached for another magnet. And this, she said, why is Rowan Klein on this list? I froze. Who? Rowan Klein? Elaine said, reading the name on the magnet. I do not know this person. Why are they at table 6? That is, I squinted at the board. I did not invite a Rowan Klein. Jessica, the coordinator, shuffled her papers. Oh, that was a +1 request from your college friend. Tessa. She asked if she could bring a guest since her partner is out of town. No, Elaine said sharply. Absolutely not. We do not have strangers at a Morgan wedding. Vetting is essential. She pulled the magnet off the board and dropped it into the trash can next to the desk. Mom, I said, my voice rising. You cannot just throw a guest in the trash. Tessa is my maid of honor. If she wants to bring a friend, she can bring a friend. Elaine turned to Howard. Howard, tell her. Howard looked up from his phone. Vivian, be reasonable. We are paying for these plates. $250 a head. Why should we pay for a stranger to eat steak and drink champagne? It is wasteful. It is not about the steak. I said, feeling the heat rise in my cheeks. It is about respect. Tessa is my best friend. Elaine sighed. The sound of a martyr being forced to endure a toddler's tantrum. Fine, if it means that much to you. Tessa can bring her little friend. But they sit at table 19 with the Kellehers. She fished the magnet out of the trash and slapped it onto the back corner of the board. Now, Elaine said, clapping her dust-free hands together, let us discuss the speeches. I have drafted a few remarks for your father. We will need about 15 minutes before the toasts begin. 15 minutes, I said. Dad, you hate public speaking. You said you wanted to do 2 minutes. Tops. Howard shrugged. Your mother thinks it is important to set the tone. We have a lot of colleagues coming. It is a good opportunity to remind everyone of the family legacy. Legacy, that word. It was the anchor that dragged everything down. I looked at Ben, who had just walked in. He was leaning against the doorframe, watching the scene. He did not look angry. He looked sad. He looked at me not with pity, but with a question in his eyes. How long are you going to do this? I took a breath. We need to cut the speech to 5 minutes. I said, people want to dance, not listen to a board meeting report. Elaine's eyes narrowed. It was a microscopic shift, but I knew it. It was the look that preceded a withdrawal. Vivian, she said, her voice dropping an octave, we are doing a great deal for you. We are making this day possible. Do you really want to argue over 10 minutes of your father's time? Is that how you show gratitude? The trap snapped shut. If I argued, I was ungrateful. If I submitted, I was erased. Fine, I said, looking at the floor. 5 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever you want. Ben stiffened. He opened his mouth to say something, but I shot him a look. Please, not here, not now. He closed his mouth, but the disappointment radiated off him in waves. 2 hours later, I was sitting in a wine bar downtown with Tessa. The venue meeting had ended with Elaine rewriting the entire timeline of the reception to ensure maximum flow, which really just meant maximum visibility for her and Howard. Tessa Lane had been my best friend since freshman year at Boston University. She was the only person who knew the full extent of the Morgan madness. She poured me a glass of Pinot Noir and slid it across the table. Drink, Tessa said. You look like you have been interrogated by the CIA. Basically, I said, taking a large sip. They moved your seat. By the way, You are now sitting with the loud cousins in the Siberian wilderness of the reception hall. Tessa laughed. I love the loud cousins. They know how to party. But let me guess. Elaine did it? I nodded. She threw your +1 in the trash can. Literally. Before I fished him out. Who is he? Anyway. Rowan? Oh, just a guy I know from the city, Tessa said, waving her hand vaguely. Thought he might be fun. He is smart. Works in finance or something. I thought you might like him. Or, well, I thought he would fit in. I leaned back, rubbing my temples. Mom freaked out. She said we do not have strangers at Morgan weddings. She acted like he was going to steal the silverware. Tessa's expression shifted. She looked down at her wine. That is, interesting, that she would react that strongly to a name she does not know. Everything is a threat to them. Tessa, I said, every person they cannot control is a variable they want to eliminate. Tessa looked at me sharply. Viv, why did you take the money? I sighed. It is the question of the century, is it not? I know why. I continued, because I thought if I let them pay, they would feel involved. And if they felt involved, they would be nice. I thought I could buy their approval with my compliance. And? Tessa asked. And now I realize the price has gone up. I said, it is not just compliance anymore. They want ownership. They want the wedding to be a Morgan production, starring Vivian as the grateful prop. Tessa reached across the table and took my hand. You can still say no. Viv, you can pay them back. You have savings. I shook my head. It is 3 days away. If I pull the plug now, they will cause a scene that will burn down Briar Glen. They will cancel vendors. They will tell everyone I'm having a breakdown. I just have to get through Saturday. Then I can go back to being low contact. My phone buzzed on the table. It was a number I did not recognize. Hello? I answered. Vivian? It is Jessica from Larkspur House. Hi? Jessica, I said, sitting up straighter. Is everything okay? I wanted to check something with you, Jessica said. Her voice was trembling slightly. Your mother just called the office. She wanted to change the vendor access times. She told the lighting crew to arrive 3 hours later than planned because she does not want them cluttering the space while she is taking photos. What? I said. Jessica, if they arrive late, they will not have time to set up the chandeliers. I know, Jessica said. I tried to tell her that. She told me that she is paying the invoices, so she sets the schedule. She asked me to remove 3 tables from the floor plan entirely. Which tables? I asked, my blood running cold. Tables 12, 14, and 15, Jessica said. I did the mental math. Those were the tables for my colleagues from North Harbor Consulting and Ben's friends from the hiking club. She is uninviting people, I whispered. She said the room felt crowded. Jessica said, she said you were overwhelmed by the guest count and that she was helping you pare it down to a manageable size. She told me you were too stressed to make the call yourself. I closed my eyes. The narrative. They were building the narrative. Vivian is fragile. Vivian cannot handle the pressure. We are saving her. Jessica, listen to me, I said, my voice dropping to a register I usually reserved for hostile CEOs. Do not change a single thing. Do not move a chair. Do not change a timestamp. But she said she would stop the check. Jessica said, she was very specific. Vivian. She said if I did not make the changes by end of day, the final payment for the venue would be withheld. I felt a cold clarity wash over me. It was the feeling I got right before I walked into a boardroom to dismantle a bad deal. I looked at Tessa, who was watching me with concern. Jessica, I said, I need you to do nothing for 1 hour. Can you give me 1 hour? Yes, Jessica said, but please, Vivian, I cannot work for free. You will not have to. I said, I will fix this. I hung up the phone. What happened? Tessa asked. They are holding the wedding hostage. I said, they are threatening to stiff the venue if the coordinator does not cut my friends from the guest list. Tessa's mouth fell open. That is evil. No, I said, standing up and grabbing my purse. It is leverage. and I am done being leveraged. I went back to the apartment. Ben was in the kitchen, making stir-fry. When he saw my face, he turned off the burner. "What is it?" he asked. I did not answer him immediately. I walked into the home office and booted up my laptop. I opened a new spreadsheet. I named it Freedom. I pulled up my banking app. I pulled up my investment accounts. I pulled up the emergency fund I had started 10 years ago, the one I jokingly called the Runaway Fund. "Viv?" Ben asked, standing in the doorway. "I need you to tell me exactly how much we have in the joint savings," I said, my fingers flying across the keys. Ben walked over. "About 12,000. Why?" "I am calculating the total cost of the wedding." I said, "Every vendor, every deposit, every outstanding balance." Ben looked at the screen. "Viv, your parents are paying for the big-ticket items, the venue, the catering. Not anymore." I said. I explained what Jessica had told me. I told him about the threats, the cut tables, the narrative that I was overwhelmed. Ben was silent for a long time. Then he reached out and touched my shoulder. "Okay," he said. "Okay?" I asked, looking up. "Okay. Let us do it," Ben said. "I have some money set aside for the truck repairs. We can use that. I can call my brother. He can float us a loan if we need it." I looked at this man. He did not ask if I was sure. He did not tell me to calm down. He just picked up a shovel and started digging alongside me. "I have it covered," I said, looking back at the numbers. "I have been saving for a house down payment. It is enough. It will wipe me out. But it is enough." I spent the next 3 hours building the spreadsheet. I listed every vendor. I found their direct contact numbers. I drafted emails to each of them, explaining that the point of contact was changing to me, effective immediately. I did not send them yet. I needed to be ready. It was midnight when I finally closed the laptop. Ben had gone to bed, but I was too wired to sleep. I sat in the dark living room, watching the streetlights cast shadows on the floor. I checked my email one last time on my phone. There was a new message in my inbox. It was from an address I did not recognize. Watcher 82, Proton Mail, .com, . The subject line was just, the guest list, . I frowned and opened it, . Dear Vivian, you think your parents are micromanaging your wedding because they are perfectionists. They are not. They are trying to keep certain people out of the room tomorrow. They are scrubbing the list because they are afraid of who might talk to whom. Check the names they removed. Then ask yourself why a developer and a philanthropist are terrified of a few harmless guests. Good luck. There was no signature. I stared at the screen, the names they removed, the Kelleher's, my college friends, and then I remembered the magnet in the trash can. Rowan Klein. Elaine had said, "We do not have strangers at a Morgan wedding," but she had reacted with more than just snobbery. She had reacted with speed. She had thrown that name away as if it were burning her hand. I went back to my laptop. I opened the spreadsheet. I added a new tab. Tab 2. The uninvited. I typed Rowan Klein into the first cell. I did not know who he was. I did not know why my parents feared him. But if Elaine Morgan wanted him gone, then I definitely wanted him there. I closed the laptop. The game had changed. They thought they were planning a wedding. I was planning a sting operation. I walked into the bedroom and crawled into bed beside Ben. He shifted in his sleep, reaching out to drape an arm over my waist. I laid there in the dark, listening to his breathing, and for the first time in months, I did not feel small. I felt dangerous. My parents had given me an ultimatum. They wanted me to pay. I stared at the ceiling. Oh, I would pay. I would pay for every single cent, and then I would make sure they got exactly what they paid for. The truth. I closed my eyes and waited for the morning. The Friday morning sun hit the windshield of my car with a glare that felt more like an interrogation lamp than a dawn. I pulled down the visor and checked my reflection in the vanity mirror. My eyes were rimmed with red. Despite the concealer I had applied with surgical precision, I looked like a woman who had slept 3 hours, which was exactly what I was. Elaine had texted at 6 in the morning, Breakfast at the hotel. 8 sharp. We need to review the final itinerary. Do not be late. It was not a request. It was a summons. I drove to the Grandview Hotel, the most expensive lodging in Briar Glen, where my parents had booked the presidential suite. They did not stay in guest rooms. They occupied territories. I handed my keys to the valet and walked through the revolving doors, my heels clicking on the marble floor with a sound that echoed like gunfire in my own ears. They were waiting for me in the hotel restaurant, seated at a corner table that offered privacy and a view of the manicured gardens. The table was set for 3, but it felt like a negotiation table for a hostile takeover. "Good morning, Vivian," Howard said. He did not stand. He gestured to the empty chair opposite him. "You are 4 minutes late. Traffic." I lied. Sitting down, I placed my purse on the floor, keeping it close to my feet. "Good morning, Mom, Dad." Elaine was wearing a silk blouse that probably cost more than my first car. She looked immaculate, her hair coiffed into a helmet of blonde perfection. She did not smile. She pushed a leather folder across the table toward me. "We have some concerns," Elaine said, picking up her teacup. "Serious concerns about the trajectory of tomorrow." I looked at the folder. It was thick. "What is this?" Howard cut into his eggs Benedict with precise, violent strokes. "We have been reviewing the vendor contracts and the guest list again. We feel that things have become loose. The Morgan brand is about precision. Vivian, it is about excellence. This wedding is reflecting poorly on us." I felt a spark of irritation in my chest. "It is my wedding, Dad. It is not a corporate retreat." "That is where you are confused," Howard said, chewing slowly. "We are investing over $60,000 into this event, in any other context. That makes us the majority shareholders, and shareholders have rights." "Open the folder," Elaine said softly. I flipped open the leather cover. Inside was a document typed on heavy bond paper. The title read, "Event Protocol and Asset Protection Addendum." I scanned the first page, and my breath hitched. It was a list of demands, not suggestions. Demands. Item 1. The guest list. The parents reserve the right to veto any guest deemed reputational risk. Item 2. The speeches. All toasts must be pre-approved by Howard Morgan to ensure appropriate content. Item 3. The unity photo. A mandatory 30-minute photography session featuring only the Morgan immediate family, to be distributed to local press outlets. Item 4. Financial conduct. The bride agrees to sign the attached addendum to her prenuptial agreement, acknowledging that any future financial assistance from the Morgan family is contingent upon adherence to family code of conduct. I looked up, my hands trembling. "Is this a joke? Do we look like we are joking?" Howard asked. "You want me to sign a legal document that says you can control my marriage because you paid for the flowers?" I asked, my voice rising. "Lower your voice," Elaine hissed, glancing around the empty restaurant. "It is not about control. Vivian, it is about protection. We have worked too hard to build our standing in this community to have it eroded by your chaotic choices. That boy you are marrying, he is nice enough, but he does not understand how our world works. He thinks he can just exist without strategy. He is a landscape architect." "Mom," I said, "not a politician. He is marrying a Morgan." Howard said, "That comes with responsibilities." I closed the folder. "I cannot sign this." "I will not sign this." Howard put down his fork. He wiped his mouth with a linen napkin and placed it on the table. "Then we will not pay," he said. The silence that followed was absolute. The clinking of silverware from the other tables seemed to vanish. "Excuse me?" I whispered. "We have a schedule of payments due today by noon," Howard said, ticking them off on his fingers. "The caterer, the final venue deposit, the band, the florist. It totals roughly $28,000. If you do not sign that document and agree to our terms, including the removal of those undesirable guests, we will simply not authorize the transfers." "You would cancel the wedding?" I asked, staring at him. "You would let the vendors walk away 24 hours before the ceremony?" We would not be canceling anything, Elaine said, her eyes welling up with sudden, weaponized tears. You would be canceling it, Vivian, by being stubborn, by refusing to honor your family. Do you know how humiliating it is for us to have a daughter who treats us like an ATM, but refuses to listen to our wisdom? We are trying to help you avoid a disaster. She reached across the table and touched my hand. Her skin was cold. Just sign the paper. Viv, she said, using the nickname I hated. Let us handle the details. We know who should be in that room. We know what should be said. Why do you always have to fight us? Why do you want to ruin the family image? I pulled my hand away. The guilt washed over me. A familiar, suffocating tide. Maybe I am being difficult. Maybe I am ungrateful. That was the script they had installed in my brain since I was 5 years old. If you disagree, you are defective. I need to think about it. I said, grabbing my purse. You have until noon, Howard said, checking his watch. At 12 o'clock, I either call the bank to authorize the wires, or I call them to freeze the account. It is a business decision. Vivian, treat it like one. I walked out of the hotel without looking back. I did not cry until I was in the safety of my car. And even then, it was not a sad cry. It was a rage cry. I drove straight home. Ben was sitting at the kitchen table, polishing his dress shoes. He looked up when I stormed in, and his face fell. They did it, didn't they? He asked. I threw the folder onto the table. Read it. Ben wiped his hands on a rag and opened the folder. He read in silence for 5 minutes. His brow furrowed, but he did not get angry. Ben never got angry in the way I did. He got quiet. He got focused. He looked up at me. This is not a wedding plan. Viv, this is a hostage negotiation. I know, I said, pacing the length of the kitchen. They are threatening to pull the funding by noon today if I do not sign. They want to cut the guest list. They want to script the speeches. They want me to sign a legal waiver that basically says they own us. Ben tapped the paper, this part here. The financial conduct clause. It is vague on purpose, contingent upon adherence to family code of conduct. Viv, if we buy a house they do not like, they could sue us for breach of conduct if they ever gave us a birthday check. This is not about protecting their money. It is about keeping a leash on your neck. I sank onto the sofa, putting my head in my hands. I cannot pay for it. Ben, I have savings. But $28,000 by noon? And the other incidentals? Ben sat down next to me. He took my hands. How much is in the Freedom Fund? He asked. I looked at him. I had told him about the spreadsheet last night, but I had not expected him to remember the name. I have roughly $18,000 in liquid savings. I said, you said we have 12 in the joint. That is 30, but that drains us to 0. If the car breaks down next week, we are walking. If one of us loses a job, we are homeless. We are not going to be homeless, Ben said firmly. I have a line of credit for the business I have never touched. It has a $10,000 limit. I shook my head. I cannot ask you to put wedding debt on your business credit. That is insane. No, Ben said. Insane is letting your father treat our marriage like a subsidiary of Morgan Crest Development. Viv, do you want them to own tomorrow? No, I whispered. Then we buy them out. Ben said, we execute a hostile takeover of our own wedding. I looked at the clock on the microwave. It was 9:30 in the morning. We had 2.5 hours before Howard's deadline. I pulled out my phone. I need to call Jessica. I need to know exactly where the money stands. I dialed the wedding planner. She answered on the first ring, sounding breathless. Vivian, thank God. I have been trying to reach you. Your mother emailed me at 7 this morning. She told me to put a hold on the floral order until further notice. She what? I asked. She said there was a budgetary review pending. Jessica said, the florist is freaking out. Vivian, the flowers are already cut, if they do not get the final payment by 1 o'clock. They are not loading the van tomorrow. And the caterer? I asked. Same thing. Jessica said, your father called the catering manager and told him to pause the food prep. He said he would confirm the final guest count at noon. Vivian, We cannot pause food prep for 200 people the day before. They are already brining the chickens. My parents were not bluffing. They were already turning the screws. Jessica, listen to me closely. I said, do not take another call from Elaine or Howard Morgan. Do not open their emails. But they are the payers on the contract, Jessica said. Legally. I have to listen to them. Not for long. I said, send me the direct payment links for every single vendor, the caterer, the florist, the band, the venue. Send them to my personal email right now. Vivian, that is thousands of dollars, Jessica warned. Just send them. I said, and Jessica? Yes? The guest list is locked. No one gets removed. If my mother tries to take a chair away, you add 2 more. I hung up. I looked at Ben. Let's go to the bank. We drove to the Juniper Community Credit Union. It was a small brick building on Main Street, a far cry from the glass and steel fortress where my father did his banking. I had opened an account here years ago because I liked that the tellers gave dog treats to customers. We sat in the cubicle of a loan officer named Mrs. Gable. She was a woman in her 60s with reading glasses on a chain. I need a bridge loan, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Or a personal loan. Immediately, Mrs. Gable looked at my panicked face and then at Ben's calm one. Is everything all right, dear? I am getting married tomorrow, I said, and I need to pay for it myself. Today, right now. Mrs. Gable typed on her keyboard. She looked at my credit score. She looked at my savings history. You have excellent credit, Vivian, she said, and you have been a member for 10 years. I can approve a short-term personal loan of $10,000 on the spot. The interest rate is a bit higher than a mortgage, but I do not care about the rate. I said, I just need the cash in the checking account. She printed the papers. I signed them so fast my signature was just a jagged line. By 10:45, the money was in my account. We sat in the parking lot of the credit union. I opened my laptop, tethering it to my phone's hotspot. Okay, I said. Phase 1 complete. We have the capital. Now we distribute. I opened the email from Jessica. The links were there. I started with the caterer. Amount due, $8,400. I entered my debit card number. Processing. Approved. I moved to the florist. Amount due, $4,200. Approved. The band. The photographer. The lighting crew. I watched my savings account drain. Years of discipline. Years of skipping vacations and brown bagging lunches. Vanishing in clicks. It physically hurt. I felt a wave of nausea as the balance dropped from healthy to critical. Ben watched me. He did not look away. He put his hand on my knee and squeezed. You are buying your freedom, he said softly. It is a bargain. I clicked the final button. The venue, $12,000, approved. I sat back. Exhaling a breath I felt like I had been holding since I was 16. It is done. I said, they are all paid. Now call them. Ben said, lock the doors. I called the caterer first. Hi, this is Vivian Morgan. I just paid the balance in full. I need to update the authorized point of contact on the account. Go ahead, the manager said. From this moment on, the only people authorized to make changes to the menu, the timeline, or the setup are myself and Benjamin Calder. No one else. Not Elaine Morgan. Not Howard Morgan. Understood. The manager said, do you want to set a password? Yes, I said. The password is ironclad. I went down the list. Florist. Password. Ironclad. Band. Password. Ironclad. When I called the venue, Jessica sounded like she was about to cry with relief. Oh, thank God. She said, your mother has called 3 times in the last 20 minutes demanding to know why I have not confirmed the table removal. Tell her nothing. I said, actually, tell her to check her email. I am sending a notification to all vendors right now formally removing them as financial guarantors. I drafted the email. I copied my parents, Jessica, and every vendor. Subject: update on wedding logistics and authorization, dear all. Please be advised that all outstanding balances for the Morgan Calder wedding have been paid in full by the bride and groom as of 11:15 a.m. today. Elaine and Howard Morgan are no longer financially responsible for any aspect of this event. Consequently, they no longer hold authorization to make changes to the guest list, timeline, or decor. Please disregard any previous or future instructions from them. All questions should be directed to Vivian Morgan. Thank you, Vivian. I hit send. We sat in the truck for 10 minutes. The silence was heavy, charged with the electricity of what we had just done. My phone rang. The screen lit up. Mother, I stared at it. Answer it, Ben said. Do not hide. I picked up. Hello? Vivian Elizabeth Morgan. Elaine's voice was a shriek. It distorted the speaker. What have you done? I just got a notification from the caterer that my access was revoked. I paid them. Mom, I said, I paid everyone. You what? Her voice dropped, trembling with shock. You cannot afford that. That is $30,000. Where did you get that money? I work for a living. Mom, I said, and I have savings. You emptied your savings? Elaine sounded horrified. For a party? Vivian, that is reckless. That is exactly the kind of financial irresponsibility we were trying to prevent. No, I said, my voice steadying. I paid for my wedding so that you could not threaten to cancel it. I paid for the right to choose who sits at my table. I paid for my voice. There was a silence on the line, a long, cold silence. I could hear Howard talking in the background, his voice low and angry. Then Elaine came back on the line. The shriek was gone. Her voice was ice. Fine, she said. Fine? I asked, bracing myself. If you insist on handling this like a stranger, then we will treat you like a stranger, she said. You have humiliated us. Vivian, you have told the entire town that our money is not good enough for you. I did not say that. You made a public declaration. Elaine interrupted. You cut us out. So be it. We will attend as guests. Just guests. We will arrive when the invitation says. We will sit where we are told. Thank you, I said, surprised by the capitulation. But Vivian? Elaine added. Yes. Since we are merely guests, and since the guest list is now fully under your control, I assume you have finalized the head count? Yes, I said. Good, she said. We will see you tomorrow. She hung up. I frowned. That was too easy. Elaine Morgan did not surrender. She retreated to reload. Ben started the truck. What did she say? She said fine, I said slowly. She said they would come as guests. Ben pulled out of the parking lot. Watch your back. Viv, they are planning something. We drove back to the apartment to drop off the legal documents Ben wanted to shred. I felt lighter, but also exposed. The adrenaline was fading, leaving a shaky exhaustion in its wake. I sat down at my laptop to check the RSVP portal one last time. I wanted to make sure the table arrangements were locked in. I logged into the wedding website backend. I scrolled down the list. Table 1, family. Table 2, family. Table 3, college friends. I stopped. Table 4. There were names there I did not recognize. Gerald Vance, Marcus Thorne, Sylvia Thorne, Arthur Pendleton. I clicked on the names. They had been added at 11:30 a.m., 15 minutes after I sent the email. My stomach dropped. Mom did not have vendor access anymore, but she still had the login for the RSVP site because I had given it to her months ago to manage the extended family addresses. She had used the last window of access she had. I Googled the names. Gerald Vance, Senior Partner, Vance Associates Legal. Marcus Thorne, CEO. Thorne Logistics, Arthur Pendleton, Chairman, Briar Glen Zoning Board. These were not family friends. These were my father's business network, the power players of the county. Why? I asked the empty room. Why add 4 random business people right now? Ben looked over my shoulder. Maybe they are trying to pack the room with allies? People who will take their side? It felt deeper than that. These men were heavy hitters. You do not invite the zoning board chairman to a wedding unless you are trying to close a deal or hide a body. My phone buzzed. Another text. I looked at the screen. It was from the same unknown number as the email last night. The Watcher. Text message. 11:55 a.m. From unknown. The new ads on the list. Vance, Thorne, Pendleton. They aren't there for the cake. Your father owes them favors. But the real panic isn't about them. It's about who they might meet. If Rowan Klein shows up, your parents will panic. That's why they're doing this. They need the room full of their shields. I stared at the name, Rowan Klein. I still did not know who he was. Tessa's friend, a finance guy. I texted Tessa immediately. Vivian. Tessa, I need to know about Rowan. Is he definitely coming? Tessa. Yes, he's my ride. Why? Vivian. My parents are terrified of him. I need to know why. Tessa. He's just an accountant. Viv, he used to do some forensic consulting. Maybe he audited them once? Forensic consulting. The words hung in the air. My father was a developer. My mother ran charities. Their finances were complex, layered, and aggressive. If Rowan Klein was a forensic accountant, I looked at Ben. I think my parents aren't just controlling me. I said slowly, I think they are hiding something, and they think my wedding is the scene of the crime. Ben looked at the screen. Then let's bring the witness. He said, I went back to the spreadsheet. I deleted the uninvited tab. I moved Rowan Klein to table 4, right next to the zoning board chairman. If my parents wanted to play games with the seating chart, I would give them a front row seat to their own nightmare. I closed the laptop. Let them come, I whispered. Let them all come. I met Rowan Klein at a coffee shop 3 towns over. It was a nondescript place with sticky tables and burnt coffee. Exactly the kind of spot where you would not run into anyone from the Briar Glen Country Club set. Tessa had arranged it. She sat next to me, vibrating with nervous energy, while Rowan sat across from us. He was unassuming, a man in his late 30s with wire-rimmed glasses and the kind of beige sweater that made him blend into the upholstery. He did not look like a threat. He looked like the guy who did your taxes and reminded you to save your receipts. Thank you for meeting me, I said, wrapping my hands around a warm mug. I know this is strange. It is a little strange, Rowan admitted. His voice was soft, precise. Usually, when I get called for a consultation, there is a subpoena involved, or at least a retainer. I am not asking for a consultation. I said, I am asking why my mother threw your name in the trash can. Rowan adjusted his glasses. He looked at Tessa, then back at me. I worked at a firm called Archer Associates about 5 years ago. Rowan said, we did some third-party auditing for regional nonprofits. One of our clients was the Briar Glen Community Trust, my mother's charity. I said, she has been on the board for 20 years. Right, Rowan said. It was a standard audit, routine, but I found a few irregularities, specifically regarding the gala funds. There were large transfers made to a vendor called MCD Holdings for event consulting. MCD, I said, the acronym clicking instantly. Morgan Crest Development, my father's company. Rowan nodded. Exactly. Now, it is not illegal for a charity to hire a board member's company, provided it is disclosed and the rates are fair market value, but the amounts were high, very high, and the services were vague. Strategic planning, logistical support. When I asked for itemized invoices, the board got very defensive. Your mother, specifically, filed a complaint against my firm for unprofessional conduct. She tried to get you fired? I asked. She succeeded in getting me removed from the audit. Rowan said, the firm did not want to lose the contract, so they swapped me out for a junior associate who asked fewer questions. The audit passed. The gala went on. Life continued. I sat back, feeling a cold weight settle in my stomach. So they were funneling charity money into my father's business? I cannot say that for sure. Rowan said carefully, I never saw the invoices, but the optics were bad. And if I were in a room with your father's business partners, men who sit on the zoning boards and the bank committees, and I started talking about the gala finances, it would be uncomfortable. Uncomfortable, I repeated. That is why they scrubbed the list. They did not want the man who knew about the book sitting next to the men who signed the permits. It is a theory. Rowan said. But people like your parents, they live on reputation. The story has to be perfect. A guy like me is a plot hole. I drove back to Briar Glen in silence. Tessa tried to make jokes about eloping to Vegas, but I could not laugh. I was replaying every memory of my parents from the last 5 years. The new cars, the renovations to the lake house, the way my father always talked about creative financing. They were not just controlling, they were hiding. I went into the office to clear my desk. I had taken the next 2 days off, but I needed to sign the final handover papers for the Henderson file. When I walked in, the atmosphere was weird. People stopped talking when I passed their cubicles. My assistant, normally chatty, just handed me a stack of mail and looked at her shoes. Sarah called me into her office. "Close the door." "Vivian," she said. I sat down. "What is wrong? Is it the file?" "The file is fine," Sarah said. She looked uncomfortable. She tapped a pen against her desk. "Vivian, you know we have been looking at the senior partnership track for you. You are the best consultant we have." "Thank you," I said, "but we need to talk about stability." Sarah said. "Stability?" I asked. "I had a phone call this morning," Sarah said, "from a member of the local Chamber of Commerce. He mentioned that there were some concerns about your personal situation, that you were under a significant amount of financial and emotional stress, that there might be some volatility." I stared at her. "Who called you?" Sarah sighed. "It was informal. Vivian, but he said he had spoken to your father." "My father," I said, my voice flat. "My father called the Chamber of Commerce and told them I was unstable?" "He framed it as concern," Sarah said quickly. "He said he was worried you were taking on too much, that the wedding planning had caused a bit of a breakdown. He wanted to know if we could lighten your load for a few months, maybe. Step back from the client-facing roles." I stood up. The room was spinning slightly. "He is trying to sabotage my promotion." I said, "Because I would not let him pick the flowers." "Vivian, sit down," Sarah said. "I am not taking you off the track. I know your work. But you need to understand, in this town, the whisper network is powerful. If Howard Morgan says his daughter is having a breakdown, people believe him. You need to get ahead of this." I walked out of Sarah's office with my hands shaking. This was not just about the wedding. This was a scorched earth campaign. If I did not submit to their control, they would burn down everything else I had built. My career, my reputation, my sanity. I drove to my parents' house. I did not call first. They lived in a sprawling colonial on the hill, the kind of house that looked like it belonged on a postcard. I parked in the driveway and walked through the front door without knocking. Elaine was in the living room, arranging flowers in a crystal vase. Howard was in his study, the door open. "Vivian," Elaine said, looking up, "we were not expecting you." "Why?" I asked, standing in the foyer. "Why did you call my boss?" Elaine paused. She snipped the stem of a rose with a sharp click. "We did not call your boss," she said calmly. "Your father spoke to a friend at the chamber. He was expressing concern. You have been erratic. Vivian, spending your entire savings in one morning, changing passwords? That is not the behavior of a stable person. You are trying to ruin my career," I said, stepping into the room. "You are trying to make me look incompetent so I will have to come crawling back to you for help. We are trying to protect you from yourself," Howard shouted from the study. He walked out, holding a tumbler of scotch. "You are making enemies. Vivian, you are inviting people who do not belong. You are rejecting our guidance. Do you think you can survive in this town without our support?" I looked at him, really looked at him. He looked tired. He looked smaller than I remembered. "Why are you afraid of Rowan Klein?" I asked. The silence that followed was heavy. Elaine froze, the shears hovering over a lily. Howard's face went a shade of gray that matched his suit. "Who?" Howard asked, his voice too loud. "Rowan Klein," I said. "The accountant? The one who audited Mom's charity? The one who asked about the payments to your company?" Elaine put the shears down. Her hand was trembling. "You have been listening to gossip," she said. Her voice was venomous. You are letting outsiders poison you against your own family. Is it gossip? I asked. Or is it the truth? Did you funnel charity money into your business? Dad, is that why you need the guest list to be safe? Because you are afraid someone might ask the wrong question in front of the wrong person? Get out, Howard said. Answer me. I said, get out, Howard roared. He slammed his glass down on the side table. Liquid splashed onto the polished wood. You ungrateful, insolent child. We gave you everything. We built this life for you. And this is how you repay us? By digging up dirt? By inviting our enemies to your wedding? I am not inviting enemies. I said, I am inviting the truth. Elaine walked over to me. She stood inches from my face. She smelled of expensive perfume and fear. If he comes, she whispered, you will regret it. We will make sure of it. I walked out. I went back to the apartment and found Ben sitting at the table with his sister. Maris was a lawyer in Boston. A sharp, no-nonsense woman who wore blazers as armor. Hey, Viv, Maris said. Ben told me everything. I reviewed the document they wanted you to sign. And? I asked, dropping my keys on the counter. And it is insane, Maris said. She tapped the paper. This clause about financial conduct? It is drafted to be deliberately broad. If you signed this, and then you accepted even $1 from them, for a house, for a baby gift, for anything, they could argue that you entered into a binding contract to follow their rules. They could sue you for breach if you didn't send your kids to the right school. It is not a prenup addendum, it is an indenture. I sat down. I felt exhausted, bone deep. They called my work. I said, they told the Chamber of Commerce I was having a breakdown. Ben slammed his hand on the table. That is it. That is the line. Maris looked at me with sympathy. They are escalating because they are losing. Viv, this is an extinction burst. They know they cannot control you with money anymore, so they are trying to control the environment around you. I do not want a war, I said, putting my head in my hands. I just want to get married. I want to eat cake and dance with my husband. Why does it have to be a legal battle? Because they do not know how to love you without owning you, Maris said gently, and you just revoked their ownership papers. I looked at Ben. What do? We draw the final line, Ben said. We tell them the terms. If they cannot abide by them, they do not come. I nodded. I pulled out my phone. I drafted the text. I kept it short. I kept it unemotional. Mom, Dad, we need to be clear about tomorrow. 1. You are welcome to attend as guests. That means you arrive at the ceremony time. Sit in your assigned seats and enjoy the reception. 2. You have no authority over vendors, the timeline, or the guest list. 3. There will be no speeches from you unless we mutually agree on the text beforehand. 4. If you attempt to change anything, or if you cause a scene, you will be asked to leave. These are the conditions. Let me know if you accept. I pressed send. We waited. 10 minutes. 20. My phone chimed. Elaine. Then we won't be there, and we'll make sure everyone knows why. I stared at the screen. They were boycotting. They were actually going to skip their only daughter's wedding rather than give up control. I felt a tear slide down my cheek. It was not relief. It was grief. It was the realization that the parents I wanted, the ones who would just be happy for me, did not exist. Viv? Ben asked. They are not coming. I said. Maris reached across the table and squeezed my hand. I am sorry. Viv, I wiped my face. Do not be sorry. Now I know. I stood up. I went to the fridge and pulled out a bottle of wine. If they want to boycott, let them, I said, pouring 3 glasses. But I'm not going to let their absence be the story. Ben took a glass. What do you mean? I said, taking a sip, that we are going to have the best damn wedding this town has ever seen. And if they are not there to see it, that is their loss. But deep down, I knew it was not over. Elaine's text had a thread in it. We'll make sure everyone knows why. They were not just staying home. They were planning a counter-narrative. They were going to spin their absence as a martyrdom. Poor Elaine and Howard, pushed away by their cruel, unstable daughter. I looked at the guest list again. Rowan Klein was at table 4. The zoning board chairman was at table 4. If my parents were not coming, then Rowan's presence was less explosive, but it was still important. It was a symbol. I went to bed that night with a heavy heart. I dreamed of empty chairs. I dreamed of my father standing at a podium, reading a list of my failures to a cheering crowd. I woke up on my wedding day to the sound of rain against the window. It was fitting. I got out of bed. I made coffee. I sat by the window and watched the gray sky. My phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. The watcher again. They are coming. They are bringing guests. I frowned. They said they were not coming. They lied. They are bringing the sharks. Be ready. I felt a surge of adrenaline. Of course, they would not stay away. Staying away meant ceding the floor. They were coming. And they were bringing reinforcements. I woke Ben up. They are coming, I said. Ben rubbed his eyes. Who? My parents, I said. And they are bringing backup. We got dressed in silence. I put on my robe. Ben put on his suit. We drove to Larkspur House. The rain was clearing, leaving a mist over the river. It was hauntingly beautiful. Tessa met me in the bridal suite. She had champagne and a playlist of 90s pop hits. We are ignoring the drama, Tessa declared. Today is about you. I tried to smile. I tried to focus on the dress, a silk sheath that made me feel like a movie star. I tried to focus on the flowers, which were wild and green and perfect, but every time the door opened, I flinched. At 2 o'clock, the guests started to arrive. I watched from the window of the suite. I saw my friends. I saw Ben's family, loud and happy. I saw the Kelleher's, already laughing. And then I saw the black sedan. Elaine and Howard Morgan stepped out. They were dressed for a coronation. Elaine in a silver gown that shimmered like armor. Howard in a tuxedo that cost more than my car. And behind them, 2 other cars pulled up. Out stepped men I recognized from the business pages. Marcus Thorne, Arthur Pendleton, the uninvited guests from the RSVP list, the men my father had added. They walked in a phalanx, a solid wall of power and money. They were not here to celebrate. They were here to witness, to intimidate. I turned to Tessa. Go tell the coordinator. I said, seat them. Do not turn them away. Tessa's eyes widened. Viv, are you sure? They are crashing. If we turn them away, we make a scene. I said, if we seat them, we control them. Put them at table 4. With Rowan? Tessa asked. Exactly. I said, with Rowan. I watched them enter the building. My parents were smiling. It was a terrifying smile. It was the smile of people who had decided that if they could not run the show, they would steal it. I took a deep breath. I looked at myself in the mirror. I was Vivian Morgan. I was a bride. I was a consultant. I was a fighter. I am not afraid of you, I whispered to my reflection. I walked out of the suite. Ben was waiting for me at the bottom of the stairs. He looked handsome and kind and solid. He took my hand. Ready? He asked. Ready, I said. We walked toward the ceremony space. As we passed the side room, I saw them. My parents were standing there, waiting. Howard stepped forward. Vivian, he said, you look adequate. Hello? Dad? I said, I thought you weren't coming. We decided we could not let you humiliate yourself alone. Elaine said, we brought some friends. I trust you have made space for them? They are seated. I said, good. Howard said. He leaned in. His voice was a low growl. You will regret this. Vivian, you think you have won because you paid a few bills? You have no idea what you have started. I looked him in the eye. Actually, Dad, I said, I think I'm just finishing what you started. He scoffed. You are a child playing at adulthood. I walked past him. I walked down the aisle. The ceremony was a blur of emotion. I saw Ben's face. I heard the vows. I felt the ring slide onto my finger, but in the periphery. I saw them, my parents, sitting in the front row, stiff as statues, and behind them, the businessmen, watching with calculating eyes. I also saw Rowan Klein. He was sitting at table 4, looking mild and harmless. When the ceremony ended, we walked back up the aisle as husband and wife. The applause was loud. We went to the cocktail hour. Elaine was already there. She was holding a glass of champagne, holding court near the bar. She was talking to Arthur Pendleton. I saw her gesture toward me, a look of tragic forbearance on her face. I walked over to the coordinator. "Jessica," I said, "no microphone for my mother. Under no circumstances." "I know," Jessica said. "She already asked. I told her the system was preset and locked." "Good," I said. I looked around the room. It was a battlefield. The lines were drawn. On one side, the people who loved us. On the other, the people who wanted to own us. And in the middle, me and Ben. I took a sip of my drink. Let the games begin. I thought. The rain had stopped by 10 in the morning, leaving the grounds of Larkspur House smelling of damp earth and pine needles. The sky was a bruised purple that was slowly healing into a pale, watery blue. Inside the bridal suite, the air was warm and smelled of hairspray and nervous anticipation. I sat in the velvet chair by the window, my hands resting on the cool silk of my robe. My makeup artist, a woman with a calming voice named Chloe, was applying the final touches to my eyeliner. But my mind was not on my reflection. It was trying to escape the room. "Vivian," Tessa said from the sofa where she was steaming my veil. "You are doing it again. You are vibrating." I took a deep breath. "I am fine. You are not fine," Maris said. She was standing by the door, scrolling through emails on her phone, looking formidable in her navy bridesmaid dress. "You are bracing for impact. You look like a client waiting for a verdict." I closed my eyes. They were right. I was waiting for the other shoe to drop. My parents had sent that text. "Then we won't be there." But the silence since then had been deafening. I knew them too well. Elaine and Howard Morgan did not fade away. They regrouped. "I need you to do the grounding thing," Tessa said, walking over and crouching beside my chair. "Come on, 5 things you can see." I opened my eyes and looked at my best friend. "I see the pearl studs in your ears." I said, "I see the steam rising from the steamer. I see the chip in the paint on the windowsill. I see the label on the champagne bottle. I look down. I see my hands. 4 things you can feel." Tessa coached. "The silk on my legs." I said, "The cold glass of water in my hand. The tightness of the bobby pins. The rug under my feet." 3 things you can hear. "The wind outside," I said. "The murmur of the catering staff in the hallway." My own heartbeat. 2 things you can smell. "Lavender," I said, "and rain. 1 thing you can taste. Fear." I said. Tessa squeezed my hand. "Change the last one. Toothpaste," I said, managing a weak smile. "Good," Tessa said. "Listen to me. Viv, we have the security team on alert. We have the coordinator briefed. We have Maris, who is terrifying. If they show up and try to burn it down, we have extinguishers. I do not want to extinguish fires on my wedding day." I said quietly, "I just want to get married, and you will," Maris said, putting her phone away. "You are going to walk down that aisle. You are going to say I do to my brother, and then we are going to drink expensive wine and ignore anyone who tries to make it about them." There was a knock on the door. It was Jessica, the coordinator. She looked pale. "Vivian," she said, stepping inside and closing the door quickly behind her. "They are here." My stomach dropped. "My parents?" "Yes," Jessica said. "And they brought guests." I stood up, the robe slipping off my shoulder. "Who did they bring?" 2 men, Jessica said. "Older, suits." They walked right past the welcome table. "Your father told the usher that they were distinguished guests of the family and that if anyone tried to stop them, he would have the venue's liquor license reviewed by the zoning board on Monday morning." I felt a flash of cold anger. That was Howard. He did not bring a gift. He brought a threat. I walked to the window and looked down into the courtyard. I saw them. Elaine was wearing a silver gown that caught the light. It was beautiful, tasteful, and aggressive. It was a dress that said, "I am the matriarch." Howard was in a tuxedo, looking tan and fit, shaking hands with the valet like he was running for office. And behind them stood the two men I had seen on the RSVP list. Marcus Thorne, the logistics CEO who controlled half the shipping routes in the state, Arthur Pendleton, the chairman of the zoning board. They stood in a tight circle, laughing at something my father said. They did not look like wedding guests. They looked like a board of directors meeting in the parking lot. "They are smiling," Tessa whispered, looking over my shoulder. "Why are they smiling? They threatened to boycott yesterday, because they are performing." I said, "They realize that staying away makes them look petty, showing up makes them look magnanimous, and bringing Thorne and Pendleton, that is a power move. That is showing me that they have heavy artillery." Jessica cleared her throat. "What do you want me to do?" "Vivian, I can have security escort the extra guests out. They are not on the final list." I watched Arthur Pendleton clap my father on the back. "If we kick out the zoning board chairman, my father will make it his mission to destroy this venue. He will find a code violation in the plumbing by Tuesday." "So we let them stay?" Maris asked, her voice hard. "We contain them," I said, turning away from the window. "Jessica, seat them. Put them at table 4. "Table 4? Jessica asked. "That is near the back. It is a perfectly good table," I said, "and it is where I put Rowan." "Rowan Klein?" Tessa asked. "My accountant friend?" "Yes," I said. "If my parents want to play power games with their business cronies, let them sit next to the man who knows where the bodies are buried." Jessica nodded. "Consider it done. But Vivian, your mother is asking to see you." "Of course she is." I said, "Where?" "In the library." Jessica said, "She said she has a moment for you." I felt the old panic rise, the reflex to shrink, to apologize, to smooth things over. But then I looked at the spreadsheet in my mind. I looked at the paid-in-full receipts. "I will go." I said, "Alone?" Ben called from the hallway. He had just walked up, looking devastatingly handsome in his charcoal suit. He saw the tension in the room and crossed the distance in 2 strides. "You are not going in there alone. I have to," I said, reaching up to straighten his tie. "If you come, they will perform for you. They will play the victim. I need to look them in the eye." 5 minutes, Ben said. "If you are not out in 5 minutes, I am coming in." I walked down the grand staircase. The house was filling with guests. I heard laughter, the clinking of glasses, the string quartet tuning up. It sounded like a celebration. It sounded like a lie. I slipped into the library. It was a dim room smelling of old paper and leather. Elaine and Howard were standing by the fireplace. They turned as I entered. "Vivian," Elaine said. She crossed the room and stopped 3 feet away. She did not hug me. She looked me up and down, her eyes scanning for flaws. "Your hair is a bit loose," she said. "Hello, Mom. Hello, Dad." Howard did not move from the fireplace. He swirled a glass of scotch. We were surprised to see the seating chart. "Vivian, you put Arthur and Marcus at table 4? Near the kitchen?" "I put them at the table with the available seats," I said calmly. "Since they were not invited, I had to improvise. They are vital contacts," Howard said, his voice low. "Arthur is reviewing the permits for the Riverside project next month. It is important that he feels respected. This is a wedding, Dad," I said, "not a lobbying event." Elaine laughed. It was a brittle, sharp sound. "Everything is a lobbying event." "Vivian, that is what you have never understood. Relationships are currency. We brought them here to elevate the occasion, to give it some gravity. You should be thanking us." "Thanking you?" I asked. "For threatening to cut off funding? For calling my boss and telling him I was unstable?" "We did what was necessary to manage a crisis." Howard said, "You were spiraling. You spent your life savings in an afternoon. That is hysteria. Vivian, we are here to smooth things over. To show the world that the Morgan family is united. Despite your erratic behavior, I felt a calmness settle over me. It was the cold clarity of realization. They did not see me. They never had. They only saw a reflection of themselves that they needed to polish. I am not spiraling. I said, I am paying. And because I paid, I decide. You are guests. You will sit at table 4. You will eat the chicken, and you will not speak unless spoken to. Howard set his glass down on the mantel with a heavy thud. He walked over to me. He was a tall man, used to looming over people to get his way. He leaned in close. I could smell the scotch on his breath. You think you are strong, he said softly. You think writing a check makes you powerful. But you are about to learn a very hard lesson. Vivian, you do not humiliate us in front of our peers. You do not put Arthur Pendleton at the kids' table. I did not humiliate you. I said, I just stopped letting you humiliate me. You will regret this, Howard whispered. By the time the cake is cut, you will wish you had let us handle things. He straightened up, buttoned his jacket, and walked out of the room like he was leaving a boardroom negotiation that had gone stale. Elaine lingered for a second. She looked at me with a mixture of pity and disdain. You look pretty. Vivian, she said, it is a shame you are so broken. She followed him out. I stood there for a moment, counting to 5. 1, the dust motes in the light. 2, the pattern on the rug. I was not broken. I was just done. I walked out of the library and found Ben waiting in the hall. He took one look at my face and pulled me into a hug. They threatened you, he said into my hair. They tried. I said, but they are just noise. Ben, let's get married. We moved toward the ceremony area. But I stopped near the entrance to the garden. I wanted to see where they went. I saw them in the courtyard. Howard and Elaine were standing with Thorne and Pendleton. They were not mingling. They were standing in a tight cluster, looking toward the main gate. I watched them. Howard checked his watch. Thorne checked his watch. Elaine smoothed the front of her dress and looked at the driveway. They are waiting for someone, I whispered. What? Ben asked. Look at them. I said, they are not talking to each other. They are waiting. They brought Thorne and Pendleton, but they are waiting for someone else. Someone bigger. Who? Ben asked. I do not know, I said, but they think whoever it is will change the balance of power. Just then, a Toyota Camry pulled into the driveway. It was a beige, 10-year-old car that looked out of place among the luxury sedans. A man stepped out. He was wearing a suit that fit poorly. He had a beige sweater vest under his jacket. He carried an umbrella. Rowan Klein. I watched my mother. She saw the car. She saw the man. And for the first time in my life, I saw Elaine Morgan flinch. It was physical. Her spine went rigid. Her hand flew to her throat. Howard saw him too. He stopped mid-sentence. He took a half step back, as if he had been shoved. Thorne and Pendleton turned to look. They did not seem to know who Rowan was, but they saw my parents' reaction. They saw the sudden, sharp fear. That is him. I said, that is Rowan. Why are they so afraid of an accountant? Ben asked. Because he has the receipts, I said. I took Ben's hand. Come on. We walked out into the courtyard. I did not head for the bridal holding area. I walked straight toward my parents. Vivian, Elaine hissed as I approached. What are you doing out here? The ceremony starts in 10 minutes. You cannot be seen. I ignored her. I walked right past her and extended my hand to the man in the beige sweater. Rowan, I said warmly, I am so glad you could make it. Rowan Klein looked surprised, but he shook my hand. Vivian. Thank you for the invite. Tessa said it was urgent. It is. I said, I want you to meet my fiancé. This is Ben. Ben shook his hand. Good to meet you. Rowan. Elaine moved then. She cut between us, her back to Rowan, trying to block him from view. Vivian, she said, her voice high and tight. We need to go inside. Now. Why, Mom? I asked, stepping around her. I am just greeting my guest. He is not a guest. Elaine snapped. She glared at Rowan over my shoulder. What are you doing here? Mr. Klein? This is a private family event. I was invited. Rowan said calmly. He adjusted his glasses. Nice to see you again. Mrs. Morgan and Mr. Morgan, I see you have brought Mr. Thorne and Mr. Pendleton. Howard looked like he had swallowed a lemon. Hello, Klein. Rowan looked at Marcus Thorne. Mr. Thorne, I believe we met briefly during the audit of the Community Trust 3 years ago. I had some questions about your shipping invoices for the gala supplies. Marcus Thorne's eyes narrowed. I do not recall. Rowan smiled. It was a small, bland smile. I do. You charged $40,000 for shipping a tent from Boston to Briar Glen. I always thought that was ambitious. The silence that fell over the group was absolute. Elaine looked like she was going to faint. Howard looked ready to throw a punch. I hooked my arm through Ben's. Well, I said brightly, we have to go get ready to walk down the aisle. Rowan, you are at table 4, right next to Mr. Thorne and Mr. Pendleton. I am sure you all have a lot to catch up on. I watched the color drain out of Arthur Pendleton's face. He looked from Rowan to Howard, and the look was not friendly. It was the look of a man realizing he had been brought into a trap. I turned and walked away. Did you see their faces? Ben whispered as we rounded the corner. I did. I said, you just put a fox in the henhouse. Ben said, no. I said, I just turned on the lights. The ceremony was in the garden, under a canopy of white hydrangeas. The string quartet played something soft and classical. I stood at the top of the aisle with my arm linked through my father's. It was tradition, but it felt like a farce. He was stiff, his jaw clenched. Smile. Dad, I whispered. People are watching. He did not look at me. Just get this over with, he muttered. We walked. The faces of the guests turned toward us. I saw smiles. I saw tears. I saw genuine happiness from my friends, from Ben's family, from the people who actually knew me. I looked at table 4 near the back. Rowan was sitting there, drinking a glass of water, looking completely unbothered. Howard and Elaine's power guests, Thorne and Pendleton, were leaning away from him, whispering frantically to each other. We reached the altar. Ben stepped forward and took my hand. His grip was warm and solid. My father sat down. He did not kiss me on the cheek. He just let go and retreated to the front row. I turned to Ben. The officiant began to speak, but the words were just background music. What mattered was Ben's eyes. They were brown and kind and steady. Vivian, take you, Benjamin. My voice did not shake. I spoke the words clearly, loudly enough for the back row to hear, loudly enough for my parents to hear. I promise to be your partner. I said, I promise to build a life that is ours. I promise to choose you, every day, over everything else. I saw Ben's eyes fill with tears. I promise to protect you, he said. I promise to stand beside you. I promise that you will never have to be alone in the room again. It was not a performance. It was a contract, stronger than any legal document my parents could draft. It was a declaration of independence. When the officiant pronounced us husband and wife, Ben kissed me, and the world seemed to snap into focus. The applause washed over us. We walked back up the aisle, and I felt lighter than I had in years. I looked at my parents in the front row. They were clapping, but their eyes were cold. They looked like statues in a museum, beautiful and stone-dead. I realized then that I did not hate them. I just outgrew them. The cocktail hour was held on the terrace. The sun had finally broken through the clouds. Bathing the stone patio in golden light, waiters circulated with trays of champagne. I stood with Ben, accepting hugs and congratulations, but I kept one eye on the perimeter. Elaine was moving through the crowd. She was good at this. She touched arms. She laughed at jokes. She leaned in close to share secrets. I could see her working. She was approaching the DJ booth, where the microphone stand was set up. She waited until the DJ turned his back to rifle through his records. She reached for the mic. I tensed, but Jessica was faster. The coordinator materialized out of nowhere. Her headset on, a clipboard in her hand. She stepped between Elaine and the microphone. I saw the exchange. Elaine pointed at the mic. She smiled her charming, fundraising gala smile. Jessica shook her head politely. She gestured to her clipboard. Elaine's smile faltered. She leaned in, her body language shifting from gracious to demanding. She pointed at herself. "I am the mother." Jessica did not budge. She said something brief, kept her hands clasped in front of her, and stood her ground. Elaine looked around the room. She looked for an ally. She looked for someone to witness the injustice. But everyone was looking at the sunset, or at the bride and groom, or at the bar. No one was looking at Elaine Morgan. Her smile cracked. It was a fissure that ran through her entire posture. Her shoulders slumped slightly. She looked, for a fleeting second, just like an old woman who had not been invited to speak. She turned and walked away from the DJ booth. She walked toward the bar, her movements stiff and jerky. I let out a breath. "She tried," Ben said, watching the same scene. "She failed." I said. I looked over at table 4. Rowan Klein was talking to Arthur Pendleton. Or rather, Rowan was talking, and Arthur looked like he wanted to crawl under the tablecloth. Rowan was gesturing with a breadstick, looking amiable and chatty. Arthur was sweating. Marcus Thorne was on his phone, typing furiously under the table. "What do you think Rowan is saying to them?" Ben asked. "I think he is asking about the weather," I said, "and I think he is reminding them that he remembers every number he has ever seen." I took a sip of my champagne. It tasted like victory. But then I saw Howard. He was not mingling. He was standing near the exit of the terrace, his phone to his ear. He was not looking at the party. He was looking at the driveway. He was still waiting. The uninvited guests had arrived. Rowan had arrived. But Howard was still waiting for someone. Who? I asked myself. Who is left? A server walked by with a tray of appetizers. I stopped him. "Excuse me," I said. "Is there anyone else expected to arrive?" The server checked his list. "No, ma'am. Everyone is checked in." I looked back at Howard. He hung up the phone. He looked frustrated. He walked over to Elaine and whispered something in her ear. She looked at the driveway, then back at him, and shook her head. They were anxious. "Viv," Ben said, "come dance with me." I looked at my husband. I looked at the party we had paid for. The people we loved. "Okay," I said. I turned my back on my parents and walked onto the dance floor. But the prickle on the back of my neck remained. The game was not over. They had one more card to play. I just did not know what it was yet. The reception hall at Larkspur House was transformed into a cavern of soft light and greenery. The tables were set with the wild flowers I had fought for, their stems tangled in glass jars, looking wild and free against the crisp white linens. The air smelled of roasted chicken and rosemary, a scent that grounded me in the reality of the dinner service. We sat at the sweetheart table, a small island in the center of the room. Ben's hand was resting on my knee under the tablecloth, a constant point of contact that kept me tethered to the present. Tessa stood up near the DJ booth. She held a glass of champagne, her hands shaking slightly. She hated public speaking, but she had insisted on this. "Hello, everyone," Tessa said, her voice amplifying through the speakers. "For those who do not know me, I am Tessa. I have known Vivian since we were 18 years old. We shared a dorm room the size of a closet. Laughter rippled through the room. Vivian is the kind of person who remembers your birthday." Tessa continued. "Not just the date, but the specific thing you mentioned wanting 6 months prior. She is the person who organizes the group gift. She is the person who stays late to help clean up after the party she did not even host. She has spent her entire life making sure everyone else is comfortable, making sure everyone else is okay." Tessa looked directly at me. Her eyes were bright with tears. "But today is not about Vivian taking care of us," Tessa said. "Today is about Vivian finally letting someone take care of her. I have watched Ben love her for 3 years. I have watched him listen to her, real listening, not just waiting for his turn to speak. And I have seen Vivian breathe easier when he is in the room." Tessa raised her glass. "To Vivian and Ben, may your life be full of noise and mess and joy, and may you always choose each other, loudly and without apology." The room erupted in applause. I wiped a tear from my cheek. It was such a simple wish. Noise and mess. It was the antithesis of the Morgan Standard. Then Ben's father, Frank Calder, stood up. He was a man of few words, a retired mechanic with calloused hands and a suit that was 10 years old. He looked uncomfortable holding the microphone, but his smile was genuine. "I do not have a speech written down," Frank said, his voice gravelly. "I just want to say that we are proud of Ben, and we are so happy to welcome Vivian. In our house, we do not have many rules. We just show up. If you need a tire changed, we show up. If you need a meal, we show up. That is what family does. Vivian, you are family now. You can call us at 3 a.m. We will pick up." He raised his glass. To the kids. The warmth in the room was palpable. It was a physical sensation, like sitting near a fireplace. It was the feeling of being seen, not inspected. But from my vantage point, I could see table 4. My parents were not clapping. Howard was staring at his phone, scrolling with aggressive thumb strokes. Elaine was looking at Frank Calder with a thin, polite smile that did not reach her eyes. It was the look she reserved for service staff who made mistakes. It was a look of condescending patience. Next to them, Arthur Pendleton and Marcus Thorne were engaged in a hushed, intense conversation. They were leaning in close, ignoring the food in front of them, and on the other side of the centerpiece, Rowan Klein sat alone. He was eating his salad methodically, but his eyes were darting between my father and the 2 businessmen. He was reading them. I squeezed Ben's hand. "They hate this," I whispered. "Let them hate it," Ben said, taking a sip of his wine. "Look at Frank. Look at Tessa. That is real. Viv." I tried to focus on the love. I tried to let the warmth of the speeches settle into my bones. But I knew my mother. Silence was not her natural state. If she was not speaking on the microphone, she was broadcasting on a different frequency. After the salad course was cleared, the mingling began. I watched Elaine stand up. She smoothed her silver gown and picked up her wine glass. She did not come to the head table. She did not come to congratulate us. She began to circulate. She moved to table 6, where my cousins sat. I saw her touch my cousin Sarah's shoulder. I saw her lean in, her face arranged in a mask of tragic concern. I saw her gesture toward me, then touch her own temple. I knew that gesture. It was the universal signal for she is not quite right. I watched Sarah nod politely, looking uncomfortable. Elaine moved to table 8, my colleagues from North Harbor Consulting. My stomach tightened. She was talking to my boss's wife. She was shaking her head sadly. She was playing the martyr. "I need to go to the bathroom," I said to Ben. Standing up, "Do you want me to come with you?" Ben asked. "No," I said. "I need a minute. Keep an eye on Howard." I walked through the tables, smiling at guests, accepting compliments on the dress. I moved with the grace of a bride, but my ears were tuned like radar dishes. I passed table 8 just as Elaine was moving away. I slowed down, pretending to adjust my shoe strap near the pillar, so worried about her. I heard Elaine's voice trailing off as she walked to the next group. "The stress has been unmanageable. We tried to step in, but she just snapped. We are just hoping she can get through the night without a scene." I felt a flush of heat climb up my neck. She was not just gossiping. She was seeding a narrative. If I got upset later, if I cried, if I raised my voice, everyone would nod and say, "Elaine was right. Vivian is unstable." I straightened up and walked toward the hallway. I needed air, but as I passed table 4, I heard a voice that stopped me cold. It was not my father. It was Arthur Pendleton, the zoning board chairman. He was speaking in a low, angry hiss to Marcus Thorne. They had turned their chairs slightly away from the table, creating a private barrier with their backs. Ridiculous to have him here. Arthur was saying, "Does Howard have a death wish?" "It is a power play," Marcus replied, "or stupidity. If Klein remembers the 2020 audit, we are exposed. He knows about the donation misunderstanding." Arthur said, "He flagged the transfer to Morgan Crest. If he talks to the daughter..." "He won't," Marcus said. "Howard said the daughter is clueless." She signs what is put in front of her. She is the perfect buffer. I froze. I was standing behind a large potted fern, hidden from their view by the dim lighting of the reception hall perimeter. She is the perfect buffer. She signs what is put in front of her. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. I had always thought my parents' control was emotional. I thought they wanted to manage my life because they viewed me as an extension of their social status. I thought the Morgan standard was about vanity. But this was different. This was functional. I walked past them, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I did not go to the bathroom. I walked straight to the terrace doors and slipped outside. The night air was cool. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my shaking hands. I needed to know. I needed to know exactly what they meant. I took out my phone and texted Tessa. "Send Rowan to the terrace. Now. Tell him it is an emergency." I waited in the shadows of the stone patio. Inside, the band had started playing a Motown song. The bass line thumped through the glass doors, a cheerful counterpoint to the nausea rising in my throat. 2 minutes later, the door opened. Rowan Klein stepped out. He looked around, clutching his umbrella like a shield. "Vivian?" he called softly. "Over here," I said, stepping into the light of the heat lamp. Rowan walked over. He looked nervous. "Your mother is watching me like a hawk. I think she's going to poison my steak." "Rowan," I said, cutting him off, "I need you to tell me the truth, not the polite version, the forensic version." Rowan adjusted his glasses. "About what?" "I just overheard Arthur Pendleton and Marcus Thorne." I said, "They were talking about a donation misunderstanding. They said something about me. They said Howard told them I was the perfect buffer because I sign whatever is put in front of me." Rowan's face went still. He looked down at his shoes, then back at me. "I was afraid of that," he said quietly. "Tell me," I commanded. Rowan sighed. He leaned against the stone railing. 5 years ago, during the audit of the community trust, I found a series of transfers totaling $200,000, he said. They were marked as consulting fees paid to Morgan Crest Development. "My father's company," I said. "Yes," Rowan said. "But Morgan Crest is a construction and development firm. They do not do non-profit consulting. It looked like a kickback. Your mother raises the money from donors, transfers it to your father's company for vague services, and the money disappears into the family accounts. That is embezzlement," I whispered. "It is misappropriation of funds." "At the very least," Rowan said. "When I flagged it, your father produced a document. It was a conflict of interest waiver. It stated that the board had reviewed the transaction and approved it." "Okay," I said. "So they covered their tracks." "Vivian," Rowan said, looking me in the eye, "the waiver required the signature of an independent family representative, someone who was not on the board but was a beneficiary of the Morgan estate. To attest that the funds were being used for legitimate business purposes." I stared at him. "The document your father showed me had a signature on it." Rowan said, "It was yours." I felt the blood drain from my face. "I never signed that. I never saw that document. I suspected as much." Rowan said, "The signature looked practiced, but when I asked to interview you to confirm, your mother filed the complaint against my firm. She claimed I was harassing her family. She had me removed from the audit before I could ask you a single question." I leaned back against the railing. Feeling the rough stones scrape against my bare arms, they forged my signature. I said, "My parents forged my signature to launder charity money." Or, Rowan said gently, "They slipped a piece of paper in front of you among a stack of other things. College loan papers, car insurance, trust documents, and you signed it without reading it, because you trusted them. She signs what is put in front of me." I thought back to my 20s, the flurry of paperwork my father would bring me, just standard trust maintenance. "Vivian, just sign here, here, and here. Do not worry about the legalese. I have handled it. I had signed. I had signed everything because I wanted to be the good daughter. I wanted to be easy. They did not just control me," I said, my voice shaking. "They used me. They set me up. If the IRS ever audited that transaction, who goes to jail? The signatory, Rowan said. You? I felt a wave of nausea so strong I had to close my eyes. This wasn't just toxic parenting. This was predation. They had built a trap door under my life and handed me the rope to hang myself, all while telling me they were protecting me. The event protocol document they wanted me to sign yesterday, the financial conduct clause. It wasn't about the wedding, it was about silence. If I signed that, I would be legally bound to their narrative. I would be complicit in whatever new schemes they were running with Thorne and Pendleton. Thank you. Rowan, I said. My voice sounded hollow. Vivian, Rowan said. Be careful. These men are not just mean. They are exposed. Exposed people are dangerous. I know. I said, go back inside. Do not let them see us talking. Rowan nodded and slipped back through the doors. I stood alone in the dark. I looked at my hands. They looked the same, but they felt different. These were the hands that had signed the papers. These were the hands they had used to steal. The door opened again. This time it was Ben. He saw my face and crossed the terrace in 3 strides. He did not ask if I was okay. He grabbed my shoulders and held me up. What happened? He asked. They forged my signature. I whispered. Or they tricked me into signing off on fraud. 5 years ago, Rowan told me, I explained it all. The transfers, the waiver, the conversation I overheard. Ben listened. His jaw tightened until a muscle feathering near his ear jumped. His eyes went dark. I am going to kill him, Ben said. His voice was terrifyingly calm. I am going to walk in there and throw him through a window. No, I said, grabbing his lapels. No violence. That is what they want. They want a scene. They want me to look crazy. They want you to look aggressive. If we make a scene, they win the narrative. Then what do we do? Ben asked. We cannot just go back in there and cut the cake with people who tried to frame you for a felony. We need Maris, I said. Ben nodded. He pulled out his phone and texted his sister. 2 minutes later, Maris joined us. We huddled in the corner of the terrace. Away from the glass doors, I told Maris everything. She listened with the intense, predatory focus of a litigator. She did not look shocked. She looked like she was sharpening a knife. Okay, Maris said. This changes the landscape. This is not a family dispute anymore. This is a criminal conspiracy involving the zoning board chairman and the head of a major logistics firm. What do I do? I asked. Do I call the police? Not tonight, Maris said. If you call the police now, the wedding ends. The guests are interviewed. The press gets wind of it. It becomes the worst night of your life, and they will lawyer up before the sirens stop wailing. Then what? We secure the evidence, Maris said. Tomorrow. We file a formal request for the trust's financial records. We file a fraud alert on your credit. We get Rowan to sign an affidavit about what he saw 5 years ago. We build a case that is ironclad. And tonight? Ben asked. Tonight, Maris said, looking at me. You survive. You go back in there, and you do not let them see you bleed. You strip them of their power by refusing to play their game. You finish the wedding, and then, once you are safe, you drop the hammer. I took a deep breath. I can do that, I said. I turned to go back inside, but as I reached the door, it opened. Elaine Morgan stood there. She was alone. She blocked the doorway. She looked at me, then at Ben, then at Maris. She saw the conspiracy in our posture. Vivian, she said, I need to speak to you. Alone. We are in the middle of a conversation, Ben said, stepping in front of me. I am speaking to my daughter, Elaine said, her voice icy. Move. Benjamin, it is okay. Ben, I said. I touched his arm. I will handle this. Ben hesitated, but he stepped aside. Maris shot me a look that said, do not sign anything. Elaine stepped out onto the terrace and closed the door behind her. The muffled sound of the music faded. You are making a spectacle of yourself, Elaine said. Running out of your own reception? Hiding in the dark with the groom's sister? People are talking. Let them talk, I said. And that man, Elaine hissed. That accountant. Why is he still here? He is making Arthur very uncomfortable. Arthur is a sensitive man. Arthur is a crook. Mom, I said. Elaine's hand flew up, as if she were going to slap me. She stopped herself at the last second, her palm hovering in the air. Do not use that word, she whispered. You have no idea what you are talking about. You are a child. You do not understand how the world works. I understand that you used my name to hide stolen money. I said. Elaine went still. The mask slipped. For a second, I saw pure, unadulterated panic. Then, just as quickly, she plastered the mask back on. I see, she said. He has been telling you stories. Lies. He was a disgruntled auditor who got fired for incompetence. I know about the waiver. Mom, I said, I know about the signature. Elaine stared at me. Her eyes were hard, like marbles. We did what was necessary to protect the family assets. She said, everything we do is for you. Vivian, who do you think pays for your lifestyle? Who do you think opened the doors for your career? You benefit from our standing. You cannot judge the methods if you enjoy the results. I do not want the results. I said, I never asked for them. Elaine stepped closer. She grabbed my wrist. Her grip was surprisingly strong. Listen to me, she said. Her voice was low and desperate. You are going to fix this. Right now, you are going to go back inside. You are going to ask security to escort Mr. Klein off the premises. You are going to give the microphone to your father. And he is going to give a toast that restores some dignity to this event. And if I don't? I asked. If you do, Elaine said, ignoring the question. We will forgive you. We will forget this little rebellion. We will pay off the bridge loan you took out. We will welcome you back. We will pretend none of this happened. I looked at her hand on my wrist. I looked at her face. She was offering me forgiveness. She had stolen from a charity. She had framed her daughter. She had lied to everyone we knew, and she was offering me forgiveness. It was the ultimate gaslight. I realized then that she did not love me. She loved the version of me that was useful. She loved the buffer. She loved the signatory. The real Vivian. The one who asked questions. The one who married a landscape architect. The one who had a moral compass. Was an enemy to her. I slowly peeled her fingers off my wrist. No, I said. Elaine looked stunned. No, no, I repeated. I am not kicking Rowan out. I am not giving Dad the microphone. And I do not want your forgiveness. Elaine's face twisted. You ungrateful little... I am not finished, I said. My voice was steady. It was the voice I used in boardrooms. It was the voice of a woman who knew the numbers. You are going to go back inside, I said. You are going to sit at table 4. You are going to smile. And when the wedding is over, you are going to leave. And if you ever try to use my name for anything again, if you even sign me up for a newsletter, I will walk into the district attorney's office and I will sing like a canary. Elaine took a step back. She looked at me as if I had turned into a monster. You wouldn't, she whispered. It would ruin us. Try me, I said. I turned my back on her. I walked toward the door. Vivian, she called out. Her voice cracked. If you walk through that door, you are on your own. We will cut you off. Completely. I stopped. I put my hand on the handle. I looked back at her. She looked small in her silver dress. She looked terrified. Mom, I said, I have been on my own for a long time. I just finally realized it. I opened the door and walked back into the light. Ben was waiting for me. He looked at my face. Are you okay? He asked. I took a deep breath. The nausea was gone. In its place was a cold, hard resolve. I am ready, I said. Ready for what? To change the ending. I said. I looked at the DJ booth. I looked at the crowd. They were laughing, drinking, oblivious to the crime that had been confessed on the terrace. I walked over to the DJ. Cut the music. I said. The DJ looked at me. Now? You want to do the cake cutting? No. I said. I want the mic. The music faded. The room quieted. People turned to look. I stood in the center of the dance floor. I held the microphone. My hand was steady. I saw my parents standing by the terrace door. They had just walked in. They froze when they saw me with the mic. Howard looked furious. Elaine looked pale. They thought I was going to explode. They thought I was going to scream, to cry, to make the scene they had predicted. They were ready to shake their heads and say, "See? Unstable." But I was not going to give them a scene. I was going to give them silence. I raised the microphone. I looked at Ben. He nodded. I looked at Rowan Klein. He raised his glass. I took a breath. "Thank you all for coming," I said. My voice was clear. It cut through the room like a bell. I watched Arthur Pendleton shift in his seat. I smiled. And it was a smile that didn't reach my eyes, but it reached the back of the room. "We are going to do things a little differently tonight," I said. And I began. The microphone felt cold and heavy in my hand, a solid anchor in a room that felt like it was spinning. The silence was absolute. 200 faces were turned toward me. Some looked expectant, waiting for a standard thank you toast. Others, the ones who had whispered with Elaine, looked braced for impact, expecting the unstable daughter to finally crack. I looked at Ben. He was standing just a few feet away, his hands clasped loosely in front of him. He gave me a nod. It was a microscopic movement, invisible to the back row. But to me, it was a buttress. I looked at table 4. Howard was glaring at me, his face a mask of warning. Elaine was gripping her napkin, her eyes wide, silently daring me to make a scene. Arthur Pendleton and Marcus Thorne were frozen, their forks hovering halfway to their mouths. They were all waiting for the explosion. They were waiting for me to scream, to cry, to accuse. They were waiting for the moment they could pity me and dismiss me. I took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of roasted rosemary and expensive perfume. "Welcome," I said. My voice was steady. It did not shake. It did not rise in pitch. It sounded exactly like the voice I used when I delivered a quarterly risk assessment to a board of directors. "Thank you all for being here tonight." I continued. "Weddings are strange things. We spend months planning the colors of the napkins and the flavor of the cake. But we rarely talk about the architecture of the thing itself. We rarely talk about what we are actually building." I paused. I let the silence stretch for a beat. For a long time, I thought marriage was a transaction. I said, I thought it was a merger. I thought it was about aligning assets and protecting reputations. I grew up believing that love was something you earned by following the bylaws, and that family was a corporation where you had to audition for your seat at the table. There was a ripple of movement in the room. A few guests exchanged glances. Howard's face turned a shade of dark red. "But Ben has taught me something different," I said, turning to look at my husband. "He taught me that marriage is not an acquisition. It is a partnership. It is not about control. It is about autonomy. It is about standing next to someone, not owning them." I looked back at the crowd. "So tonight, I want to say thank you. But I want to be specific." I walked a few steps closer to the edge of the dance floor. "I want to thank the people in this room who have loved us without conditions." I said, "I want to thank the friends who showed up to help us move apartments without asking for a receipt. I want to thank the family members who offered us support without asking for a vote on the board." I saw Tessa wipe her eyes. I saw Frank Calder nod. "And I want to set a precedent for the future." I said, "Because a marriage is a new legal entity. It is a new start." I turned my body slightly so I was facing table 4. I did not point. I did not glare. I just directed my attention there, and the rest of the room followed my gaze. Elaine stood up. Her chair scraped loudly against the floor. "Vivian," she said, her voice sharp and loud, cutting through the silence. "This is hardly the time for speeches. The band is waiting to play. You are tired." She started to walk toward me. Her movement was predatory. She was coming to take the microphone. She was coming to manage the asset. I did not move, but Ben did. He stepped smoothly into the space between me and my mother. He did not raise his hands. He did not look aggressive. He just stood there. 6 feet of calm, immovable landscape architect. He blocked her path not with violence, but with presence. Elaine stopped. She looked up at him. "Excuse me, Benjamin," she said, trying to step around him. "Let her finish," Ben said. His voice was low, polite, and absolute. Elaine looked at the room. She looked for support. She looked for someone to step in and save her from this social breach. But the guests were riveted. They sensed the shift. They saw a mother trying to silence a bride, and a groom protecting her. Elaine froze. To push past him would be a scene. To yell would be a scene. And Elaine Morgan did not make scenes. She took a step back. She smoothed her dress. She stood there, vibrating with impotent fury. I continued as if nothing had happened. As I was saying, I said, "This marriage is a new start, and with new starts come new boundaries." I looked directly at Arthur Pendleton. I looked directly at Marcus Thorne. And finally, I looked at my father. Moving forward, I said, my voice ringing clear, "I will be handling all of my own affairs. There will be no more proxies. There will be no more buffers." I saw Arthur Pendleton flinch. "To be clear," I said, enunciating every word, "any financial or legal matter involving my name, my signature, or my estate must come directly to me. In writing, I do not authorize anyone else to speak for me. I do not authorize anyone else to sign for me. If it does not have my wet signature on it, witnessed by my attorney, it is not valid." The statement hung in the air like a guillotine blade. It was not a toast. It was a legal notice served over wedding cake. I saw the color drain from Marcus Thorne's face. He knew exactly what I was saying. I was closing the loophole. I was killing the donation misunderstanding before it could happen again. I was telling them, publicly, that the era of using Vivian Morgan as a shield was over, and to those who cannot respect that boundary, I said, my voice softening just a fraction, "I wish you peace, but I must also wish you goodbye, because some relationships require distance to be healthy, and I am choosing health." I lowered the microphone. For 3 seconds, the room was dead silent. Then, Rowan Klein started to clap. It was a slow, solitary clap from table 4. Then Tessa joined in, then Maris, then Frank Calder, and then the room erupted. It was not the polite applause of a wedding toast. It was the confused, energetic, cathartic applause of people who had just watched someone slay a dragon, even if they didn't quite understand the nature of the beast. I handed the microphone back to the shocked DJ. "Play the music," I said. The band kicked into an upbeat soul song. The tension broke. The guests flooded the dance floor, eager to move, eager to talk, eager to process what they had just seen. I walked off the floor and into Ben's arms. He held me tight. "You did it," he whispered. I looked over his shoulder. Elaine was standing exactly where she had stopped. She looked stunned. She looked like a general who had marched her army onto the field, only to find that the ground had disappeared beneath her feet. She looked at Howard. Howard was not looking at me. He was looking at Arthur Pendleton. Arthur was standing up. He was not smiling. He said something short and sharp to Howard, gathered his coat, and walked out the back door without a backward glance. Marcus Thorne followed him a second later. The sharks were leaving. The water had become too clear for them. Howard turned to Elaine. He looked old. The vitality that usually fueled his bullying was gone, extinguished by the public removal of his power. He did not look angry anymore. He looked defeated. He offered his arm to Elaine. She looked at him. Then she looked at me. I was standing with Ben, surrounded by my friends. Tessa was handing me a glass of wine. Maris was laughing. Elaine took a step toward me. I saw her mouth open. I saw the instinct to guilt, to manipulate, to demand an apology. But then she saw Ben turn to face her. She saw Maris step up beside me. She saw Rowan Klein watching from his table. She realized she had no access. The password had been changed. The locks had been keyed. She closed her mouth. She took Howard's arm. They walked toward the exit. They held their heads high, their posture perfect, adhering to the Morgan standard until the bitter end. But just before they reached the double doors, Elaine turned back. She caught my eye across the crowded room. I expected hate. I expected a glare that promised retribution. But that is not what I saw. I saw fear. It was the terrified, hollow look of a woman who realized that she had played a game of chicken with her own daughter and lost the only thing that actually mattered. She realized that she was leaving, and I was not following. She was orbiting into the dark, and I was staying in the light. She looked at me for one long, desperate second. Then Howard pulled on her arm, and she vanished into the night. The rest of the reception was a blur of joy. It was the kind of party that happens when the air conditioning finally kicks in after a heat wave. The pressure was gone. Guests came up to me. They did not ask about the speech. They did not ask about my parents. They just hugged me. My cousin Sarah hugged me and whispered, "I am so glad you said that." A colleague from North Harbor Consulting squeezed my hand and said, "You are the strongest person I know." Even the people who were confused seemed to understand that a weight had been lifted. The unstable narrative had evaporated. You do not deliver a speech with that kind of surgical precision if you are having a breakdown. Rowan Klein found me near the bar. That was impressive. He said, I looked at him. Did I stop them? You stopped them from using you for the future. Rowan said, Thorne and Pendleton walked out because you became a liability. They cannot run a scheme through a woman who just publicly declared she reads her own contracts. And the past? I asked. The forged waiver? Rowan took a sip of his soda. That is still out there, he said. But now you have witnesses. You have a room full of people who heard you declare your autonomy. If they ever try to produce a document dated after tonight, it is void. And if they try to use the old one, well, you have me. Thank you. Rowan, I said, for coming, for telling me. He smiled. I told you. Vivian, I like clean books. Tonight, you balanced the ledger. It was 2 a.m. when we finally got to the hotel suite. My feet were throbbing. My dress was stained with wine and icing. My hair was coming undone. I sat on the edge of the massive king-sized bed and kicked off my heels. Ben took off his jacket and threw it on the chair. He walked over to the minibar, opened 2 bottles of water, and handed one to me. We did it, he said. I took the water. My hands were shaking again. We did. I said. Ben sat down next to me. He put his arm around my shoulders. How do you feel? He asked. I took a sip of water. I thought about the question. I feel free. I said, that is good. Ben said, but I also feel... My voice cracked. The tears came without warning. They were not the polite, misty tears of a wedding day. They were deep, racking sobs that shook my entire body. Ben did not tell me to stop. He did not tell me to cheer up. He pulled me into his chest and let me cry. I cried for the parents I didn't have. I cried for the little girl who had tried so hard to be perfect, thinking that if she just got an A+, or just landed the right job, or just married the right man, they would finally look at her with something other than appraisal. I cried because I had won, but the victory felt like an amputation. I had cut them off to save myself, but it still meant I had lost a limb. They chose the money. I sobbed into Ben's shirt. They chose the lie. They would rather protect a scam than protect me. I know, Ben whispered, stroking my hair. I know, Viv, and that is a tragedy, but it is their tragedy, not yours. I cried until there was nothing left. I cried until the adrenaline of the last 48 hours finally drained away, leaving me exhausted and hollowed out. Ben got up and went to the bathroom. I heard the water running. He came back with a warm washcloth. Here, he said gently, wipe your face. I took the cloth. The warmth felt good against my swollen eyes. I am sorry. I sniffled. I am crying on our wedding night. Ben smiled. He kissed my forehead. You are grieving on our wedding night. It is allowed. You just buried a ghost. Viv, it takes a minute to say goodbye. I lay back on the pillows. Ben lay down beside me. He pulled the heavy duvet over us. We lay there in the quiet dark of the hotel room. No parents, no board members, no uninvited guests, just us. We are going to be okay, aren't we? I asked. Ben took my hand. We are going to be great. We have the Freedom Fund. We have the house. We have the truth. I closed my eyes, listening to the hum of the city outside. For the first time in my life, the silence didn't feel like it needed to be filled with an explanation. It just was. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. I ignored it. It buzzed again, then a third time. I frowned. It was 3 a.m. I reached over and picked it up. The screen was bright in the darkness. It was a text message. It was not from my mother. It was not from my father. It was from a number I had saved in my phone years ago but never used. Sender. Uncle Robert. Robert was not my real uncle. He was my father's former business partner. He had been pushed out of Morgan Crest Development 5 years ago. My father had told me Robert had lost his touch and retired to Florida. I hadn't spoken to him since. I opened the message. Vivian, I heard about the wedding. I heard about the speech. Word travels fast in our circle. I am proud of you. I never thought anyone would have the guts to stand up to Howard publicly. Rowan Klein isn't the only one who remembers the old days. I have boxes in my garage in Boca, emails, memos, original drafts of waivers with signatures that look a lot like yours but were signed by a secretary named Brenda. Your parents told everyone I was senile when they pushed me out. They destroyed my reputation to protect the same secrets you just exposed. If you really want to lock the door so they can never open it again. You need the keys. I have them. But Vivian, you need to know something before you ask for them. If we release these documents, it is not just a scandal, it is prison time. For Howard, for Elaine. You are free now. You can walk away and never look back. Or you can burn the house down. Let me know what you want to do. I stared at the screen. The keys to the kingdom, or the matches to the pyre. Ben rolled over. Who is it? I held up the phone. It is Uncle Robert. I said, he says he has the proof. He says he can prove they forged my signature. Ben sat up, squinting at the light. What does he want? He wants to know if I want to send my parents to prison, I whispered. I looked at the message again. You can walk away and never look back, or you can burn the house down. I thought about Elaine's face in the doorway. We will forgive you. I thought about Howard's threat. You will regret this. I thought about the money they had stolen from a charity meant to help sick children. Funneling it into their own pockets while using my name as the getaway driver, I looked at Ben. I looked at my wedding ring. I typed my reply. It was one word. Send. I hit enter. I put the phone down. I turned off the light. The story wasn't over. The wedding was just the prologue. My parents had spent 33 years teaching me that actions have consequences. They had spent a lifetime teaching me the Morgan Standard, precision, accountability, and paying your debts. I closed my eyes and drifted toward sleep, feeling the weight of Ben's arm across my waist. They were right. It was time to pay the bill. Thank you so much for listening to Vivian's story. It was a journey of finding a voice in a room designed to keep her silent. I would love to know where you are listening from. Please comment your city or country below. It is always amazing to see how far these stories travel. And if you enjoyed this story of justice and boundaries, please subscribe to Revenge Stories for more dramas about family secrets and the people who finally stand up to them. Don't forget to share your thoughts in the comments in English. Would you have sent the text to Uncle Robert? Or would you have walked away? I can't wait to read your opinions.